Well, hello, and welcome to West Republic Baptist Church on this Wednesday evening, 7 p.m. At least that's when I'm posting it. That's when we would normally meet for our prayer and praise service. But let me remind our members, use the prayer wall. Be sure and share your praises as well as your requests, and that helps us stay in communication during the week. And then again, we are hosting our 10:45 meeting on Sunday mornings, our worship service. That's at the building. Now, we do have an online service as well for those who aren't yet comfortable given COVID-19 and the situation. But we have been back for some time on our Sunday morning, or for our Sunday morning service, and we're doing all the things that good citizens should be doing. We are social distancing, we're wearing masks, we're doing those things that we need to do to keep our church congregation healthy and safe, as well as our guests. And by the way, if you do not have a church home, we would love to have you come to be with us as well. And so that's Sunday mornings at 10:45. Now, we had a special guest last week, Rick Owens, our missionary to Wales, and his family, and what a blessing. I trust you enjoyed them if you were at the building, and I trust that you were blessed by what our missionary was able to share with you about what God is doing through the ministry there, through our ministry at West Republic Baptist, and the opportunity we have to support missionaries who believe in local churches, who believe in the local church, who practice biblical New Testament church planting and practices. And so, again, thank you for your faithful support so we can support missionaries like Rick Owens. And so, what a blessing. And again, I trust you enjoyed that. Now, last week on Wednesday evening, I shared with you, oh, by the way, those I should mention, our online service is staggered. So it means that what we have on Sunday morning, folks will see on the following Sunday morning online normally. And that's the case with this. So those online, you should have the opportunity to see Rick Owens' presentation online this coming Sunday. I don't want that to hinder folks from coming to the service. If you were planning on coming to the service live and in person, do that. There's a blessing in gathering together, and we know that that's important biblically. And so, having said all that, as I began to mention, last Wednesday we talked to you about some information from Romans chapter 12. We talked about we actually read through the whole chapter, if you'll remember, and we're familiar with the first part about being living sacrifices. Sometimes, even though we're familiar with the second verse, where it talks about not being conformed to this world, but being transformed, I think we know that verse, but too often believers in this day and age, they are conformed to the world, and they think like the world, and that should not be. And sometimes other believers influence other believers to think like the world, to be conformed to the world, even sometimes when they are trying to sound spiritual and trying to act spiritual. And so be careful that you're not just conforming to the world and you're not doing world think when you should be doing Christ think, when you should be thinking like our Lord Jesus Christ, when you should be following the example and having a transformed mind. And having said all that, I thought I would look at a passage today that really relates to, again, what we say and what we do. If you'll remember, last time we talked about, at the end of the chapter 12, it talks about behaving like a Christian, and it talked about the idea that we need to behave the way that a Christian should behave, and that we shouldn't mete out evil for evil, that we need to overcome evil with good. And so I mentioned that I was encouraging you to think like believers. Even when you're posting something, when you're saying something, think about what you're thinking. Think about your attitude and make sure you're doing whatever you're doing with the right attitude. Make sure it's biblical, what you're doing, but make sure your thinking is biblical as well. And so, having said that, another passage came to mind in another New Testament book, the book of James. Now, James has a way of stepping on our toes when we read it. James was inspired to be very direct and very to the point and very challenging and very specific. Now I'm going to read from James chapter 3, beginning in verse 1. Here's what we read. My brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment. For we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle the whole body. Indeed, we put bits in horses' mouths that they may obey us, and we turn their whole body. Look also at ships. Although they are so large and are driven by fierce winds, they are turned by a very small rudder wherever the pilot desires. Even so, the tongue is a little member, and boasts great things. See how great a forest a little fire kindles. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature. And it is set on fire by hell. For every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and creature of the sea, is tamed and has been tamed by mankind. Verse 8. But no man can tame the tongue. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. With it we bless our God and Father, and with it we curse men, who have been made in the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceed blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be so. Does a spring send forth fresh water and bitter water from the same opening? Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olives, or a grapevine bear figs? Thus no spring yields both salt water and fresh. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth. This wisdom does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, demonic. For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Now the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. You know, last week when I commented on the passage from Hebrews 12, I was going to mention a situation, and I decided against it. But having just read through James, I decided I'm going to go ahead. I won't mention specifics, but I will just say I saw a pastor online who thinks that he's very right about a particular issue, and I'm not going to get into the content or the debate. But what was really interesting and concerning to me was the attitude with which he spoke. He was very passionate, and there's nothing wrong with being passionate, but the tone was anger. The tone was self-righteous. The tone was I will just say it seemed to be said with a rotten attitude. Now, this individual was speaking on something that they are passionate about, that they feel very strongly about, and they feel is biblical. And that's fine. But when you read through James, and it talks about how we should speak, now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we should never get upset over something that is improper, but even when we speak and we're upset, we need to speak biblically and with a biblical attitude. And we need to make sure that we are godly. And it's hard to do 24/7. That's hard to do. As a matter of fact, did you notice the little phrase, no man can tame the tongue? We struggle with that, don't we? It's hard to say everything that we say and say the right thing, but on top of that, to say it with the right spirit and the right attitude. So, as we think about this passage in James, it is a powerful passage. And it talks about the hypocrisy that is sometimes evident in the believer's vocabulary, in the believer's speaking, if you will. It talks about a spring isn't going to give fresh water and salt water at the same time. And we, as believers, shouldn't be praising God and talking about how wonderful God is, and then immediately after that, cursing individuals. speaking in anger and with bitterness toward individuals. May we as believers think about what we say and think about the spirit with which we say it. And that includes social media, whether it's Instagram or Pinterest or Twitter, whatever we post, whatever meme we put up, Facebook, whatever it happens to be, whatever medium that you're using. When people look at that, and not just look at it today, but when they scroll down and look at what else you posted, that should reflect love and grace and mercy and, yes, truth, but only in a spirit of love and mercy and godliness. We need to be individuals that reflect the Lord in everything that we do. And let me encourage you, if you have something in your social media that does not reflect godliness, delete it. Now, we know you can't, it's going to exist somewhere in cyberspace, but at least keep it from being so evident. And then from that point forward, think about what you're posting. And I want to encourage you, and I need to encourage myself. We need to pray about what we post. And as we're posting, God, I'm writing this. This is what I'm speaking about. This is what I'm talking about. Am I doing this with the right spirit and the right attitude? Can I really do this in the right way? If not, don't post. Don't post. If you need to do away with one of your accounts or all of your social media accounts, that's better than being a disgrace to Jesus Christ. And so do what you need to do. Do what you need to do to be godly, to be righteous, to follow the principles that we just read about in James 3. All of us need to really think through our testimony. And you don't hear a lot about testimony these days. We hear a lot about, this is my right and I get to do this, or this is just me and I just got to be me. But what you don't hear a lot about, and by the way, some people will say, I don't care what other people think. You better. You better. That's a biblical concept. That's called testimony. It's called reputation. And that does matter. Now, I'm not saying if you're doing something right, you should not do it because somebody may get upset. That's not exactly what I'm saying. But what I am saying is you better care about your reputation and you better care about your testimony because that matters. I heard someone talking about a book and they were talking about a message in the book that everything communicates. Everything communicates, not just our words, but what we wear communicates. How we dress communicates. How we comb our hair communicates. Everything about us communicates. And we need to think about, what does it communicate? What does it tell others about what's important to us and what our relationship is with Jesus Christ? So, having said all of that, I will just wish you a great evening, and I'll look forward to seeing our church family and the guests who are in the area who would like to come at 10:45 Sunday morning at the building, West Republic Baptist Church. Have a great evening.